So I live in Tennessee, strangely enough, and I've been there forever. And so I've worked on this, during the D&D process. I was a contractor until recently, sad face. But I was a contractor with D&D, or with Wizards of the Coast, and so I'd fly up to Seattle every other month. But the best part about it, though, was that I got to really look at D&D in a way that I'd never looked at it before. I got to see it as this kind of organism that has kind of grown and evolved, this pool of weird slime, and see all the cool bits and pieces that I've loved, and learn things about the game that I didn't know. Like, did you know that second edition really didn't have jumping rules? Yeah, I didn't know that until this weekend, in fact. So there was creepy, weird stuff that just seems like things that we take for granted now after the benefit of 40 years of D&D play and design, and we just don't know about the game. So going back to all the old school stuff and playing through the old adventures, bringing it back up to see what worked and what didn't, and how that's kind of trickled into our idea of what the game is now was really fun.
Having judged for 40 years myself, what's more important, role-playing or combat?
I'm going to add story as the option. I think story is the most important part, and I would argue that is the things you remember when you play D&D is you might remember for at least a week that time you scored that critical hit against the Red Dragon, saved everybody's life. But the reason why it is important is because you have a story that you tell with your friends and your family and whoever else you play with, your enemy, I guess. But you have to tell these stories, and it's that the reason why that is important is not because you rolled a 20, because fate smiled on you, but because you did something for everybody else in the group, and you made your story that much better by your twist of great luck. And so that's what I think ultimately everything else feeds back into the story of the game. The stories we tell. It's trying to create that common lexicon that we can all use and say, when I say Tome of Horrors, we all know what we're talking about. That's what D&D's about.
Excellent to hear. Okay, are you looking for somebody? Okay. Somebody peeked in there? Okay. Yeah, so the next thing I was going to ask was, the basic has been out. The Player's Edition is out, or the Player's Guide. The DMG is coming out in November. What's next after that?
It's a secret. There was a little bit of leakage on EN World last week, I think, about Sasquatch doing another set. I worked on that product. I can't really talk about it because there hasn't been an official press release, but you can expect to see more. So you have in your hands Horde of the Dragon Queen, which is from Cobalt Quarterly or Cobalt Press and Wizards of the Coast. And so you'll see probably more of design studios producing content for D&D. So Wizards is really more of a publisher role, and they'll be reaching out to partner companies to do other adventures and system expansions and stuff like that. That's all I can talk about right now.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Let's see. So, 4th edition got a little bit too crazy on the combat. So it went for like 40 minutes for combat. So what have you done to speedrun for 5th edition?
So I think now I don't want to come off as critical of a previous edition because I love D&D and I love 4th edition. I probably wrote 1 million words for 4th edition. I know more about that game than I know about probably any other game other than 5th. But one of the things that 4th edition tried to do was create a tabletop play experience where fighting with combat, which is what the centerpiece of D&D seems to have been, at least for the design team of that game, and do it in a way that makes it interesting and engaging every time you play. And so it would be every fight that you have, whether it's with goblins or a dragon or or a lich or so on, is going to provide a really complex but engaging scenario. So everything's memorable. What we found after years of doing that, especially with the Delve format, if you know what that was a 2-page spread. It started in late 3rd edition and kind of came forward and stayed with 4th edition until we said no. The idea of that was to present the set-piece encounters. So every fight was going to be this really glorious thing. Problem is that excuse the French, it's a bitch to design those things. It really is. You can't just have a fight with 2 goblins in 4th edition. You just cannot do it. And you couldn't do it in late 3rd edition either because you were writing to a format rather than actually writing for the needs of the story you were trying to tell. So what we did was we said the interesting parts about combat are, again, going back to story, is how that fight figures into the overarching plot that the players and the dungeon master are working together to create. So fights can be as long or as short as they need to be. And because we know we changed, well, we get a little technical, where 4th edition's expectations were one monster per PC, we have one monster per 4 PCs, like it was in 3rd edition. And that was our kind of system expectation. And so monsters are balanced in a way so that you can move through them pretty quickly when you have those fights.
Oh, that's good to hear, is a former 4th edition change. Let's see, how long did it take to do 5th edition?
We started work on 5th edition in early 2011. And so there was and we did the first public reveal of an early draft at Winter Fantasy in 2012. So that was a long time to be working on that game. And we're still finishing up the Dungeon Master's Guide, so it's been an ongoing process. But we're trying to do it right. It was, when 4th edition landed in the editing phase, the game was really just a bunch of pieces, and they had it knitted together at the end. We had finished manuscripts. We had quasi-finished manuscripts from the very start. So the very first draft of the game was its massive document that had everything that we could possibly think of to throw in there. And we basically pared it back, destroyed certain things, added other things, and kept that going through the entire process.
So will there be a monster manual coming out for the 5th edition?
The monster manual should be out this month, right? Early copies landed at Gen Con, and they handed them out to I think the VIP guests, and I got a copy. It was pretty cool. And it has Modrons in it, so be excited for Modrons. They're back, and Flumps are in there too. That was one thing I was going to tell you about, was that at one point we had entertained the idea of doing a definitive monster manual, an 832-page megatome that would have every. So we polled the fans to see if you would like an 832-page mega monster manual, the only monster manual you'll ever need, and pushback, massive pushback. Nobody wanted that big of a book. So, no, I'm kidding. It would have probably been a $150 book. I mean, it would be extremely expensive, but you would have only had to buy one of them.
So do both.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, finish with the 3rd one and then come out with a companion.
Right. Well, I'm hoping there's still plenty of great monsters in D&D's lore that deserve to come back in some way or another. I think 3rd edition had some of the best monsters for D&D ever, and there's especially the Fiend Folio, which is my favorite book from that set. And I would love to see us dig back into some more weirdness. I fought for a lot of the crazier monsters from the old editions. I thought, probably wrongly, that the Carbuncle could come back and be cool. It wasn't cool. I tried, but it wasn't cool. But then the Gorbel and all the other really crazy stuff, the big developer guy, all that stuff I wanted back.
Well, some of the monsters were cool. Some of them, well, okay.
You didn't like the living bridge? It would throw you off when you walked across it.
No, I was actually fond of the gelatinous cube.
The gelatinous cube.
You see an empty corridor in front of you, what are you going to do? I'm going to walk back. Supplemental material for Forgotten Realms and stuff like that, is that coming back?
Right now, I think we are allowing there's a primer to the Forgotten Realms in the Dungeon Master's Guide. It's not the default setting, but it is an example setting. And we do mention, if you notice in the Player's Handbook, we have the Gods of Kryn, we have the Gods of Greyhawk, we have some mythological deities, and we have all that stuff inside of that to kind of go back to the idea of D&D as a giant multiverse, where all the worlds are equally important and they all kind of feed into this cool story. And as a Greyhawk guy,
Well, I'm from the 1st edition pamphlets. Let's see. Anybody else raise a hand? Over here.
We have a microphone up there in the aisle. Is that for us?
It sure can be.
It sure can be.
Why don't we just queue on up?
Yeah, queue on up.
My question kind of dovetails off that pretty well. 4th edition, one of the big narratives, he was on the Monsters Manual, was this demons versus gods, you know, fallen gods trying to take back their place, and because you're jealous of the dark powers in order to do so. So what would you say is there a primary narrative to 5th edition, or what is it? Or if there isn't, what's one that you found particularly compelling through your playtesting, things like that?
So that's a very good question. 4th edition did suppose there was, the Dawn War was probably the thing I wrote more, and every time I did story text, it always came up, and it seemed to be the well that a lot of designers went to, because it was the only thing that we had concrete in D&D's lore, and for that edition. That does still exist in the sense that the Interior Vale is still a fully playable location for your 5th edition games. There really isn't really an underlying narrative or kind of a meta plot that's running through D&D, and it kind of takes us back to the 2nd edition of the game, where there really wasn't a meta plot in that game either. Really, looking for that is to kind of hunt down the setting that you want to play. And so Greyhawk, you have all sorts of options within that world, or Forgotten Realms the same way. But I do think that there is going to be an ongoing tension between demons and gods, no matter what edition you play, no matter what world you play.
Switching gears on you a little bit. For someone like me who just recently came out of the nerd closet, who grew up in the 80s and avoided it like the plague, me and my best friend, we want to play, but we don't have anybody to play with. What would your best advice be for someone brand new off the street that's never played anything except 3rd edition?
Sure. So when I started playing D&D, I started with it was myself, my dungeon master, and one big guy named Travis, and it was just the 3 of us, and we played D&D for that one session. And then Travis stopped coming, so it was just me and my dungeon master. So I had a full group of adventurers that I controlled and played with, and that's how I started playing D&D. So what I would say is that make 4 characters and go. It doesn't matter. I mean, this is a pretty easy game to play. The rules should be fairly intuitive, and there's not a lot to keep up with, so I think you can pull it off. Yeah, 4 characters, 5 characters, hell man, I'd do 8, and see what craziness comes out of that. The other thing I would probably do too is hit a game store. Those guys at the game stores are always, they're always great people there looking to extend their fandom or their love for the hobby to other people. You can join one of those groups. D&D Encounters has stuff, or Adventurers League. Yeah, good options there.
Also, a lot of game stores are looking for people to run stuff at their game stores just to attract people to buy D&D, which kind of makes sense in the monetary format. But if you're looking for people to play, just show up at a game store and say, hey, we've got a couple of people, anybody else want to play?
To what extent are the different playable classes balanced across the levels and across different power levels of a campaign, or to what extent was that a priority when designing?
So you look at like as far as class
class
balance?
I mean, I come mostly from 3.5, where magic is always better and the best fighter is a wizard.
Right.
Fighters get nice things.
Fighters can get nice things. They can get dirty things too. No, fighters are. So what we did with the game was one of the 4th edition's balance came from the encounter time encounter currency. So we figured that every encounter was the balancing factor. So if every character put out the same amount of damage output during that encounter, you would get predictable results, and everyone would feel about the same. What we did with 5th edition was to sort of go back to an earlier expectation, which is the adventuring day as our challenge budget. So with 1st edition, 2nd edition, and 3rd edition, which also use an adventuring day budget, you have this line. So you start up here being badass, and then as you play through your adventuring day, you get down to being pretty poor. So what happens is that's the group line. You have your wizards, which will start off and follow that group line really, really closely. The fighter, however, probably starts a little lower, but doesn't go quite as deep. And so as you're playing the game, you will become less and less powerful, and it becomes the player's and the dungeon master's choice when you stop playing. And so theoretically, you would play until you run out of resources and then take your rest. The problem with 3rd edition was that you would stop being, once you left that top line, you stopped adventuring, and then you go rest, and then you go back to the top line, and distorts the way the game plays. So what we basically did was we incentivized you to continue to play, because You don't burn your spells. You spend spell slots, for example, and choose which spell to cast. So you're never running yourself out of magic missiles if you really want them. We also have at-will magic, like 4th edition had, and by having at-will magic allows a wizard to do more stuff over longer periods of time. And the fighter, on the other hand, is still going to get, as you leave the relatively simple champion subclass and move into the battle master, you have superiority dice that let you do more and more spectacular things. So we have all sorts of moving parts and pieces and fun stuff for everybody.
Another reason to keep balancing parties.
Right.
So this question is coming from someone who's dumb enough to ask a group of his in 3rd edition to power game as hard as they can in one of his campaigns. From what I observed in playing a lot of 3rd edition and 4th edition, in 3rd edition for every splat book there was like feats, classes, and a new subset of rules. Whereas in 4th edition it was basically just a bunch of new feats and classes, and that was it. No new subset of extra rules you added on. I'm curious, I don't know how much you can talk about it, but in 5th edition, are you going to be leaning more towards every new book you release, here's like, some more classes, more feats, and another subset, or is it just more classes, more feats?
Hopefully neither, to be honest with you. And part of that is that, the main goal of this game, let me back up. One of the big issues that I keep finding in a lot of games that have what I like to call the subscription model of game design. Means that once you make your initial purchase, you continue to invest in the game by buying splat books. And by having an expectation of splat books, you add new exceptions to the game. Every splat book you add to the game becomes 10 times harder to design for it. Because once you start combining those things, some people who really like to have really crazy power game type things, that's great for them. But for the other 75 to 90% of the audience, they hate that stuff, and it frustrates them when they find that I've got this, to use a magic term, channel fireball thing, right? An old school magic term. Anyway, so what we found was that we wanted to create a complete self-contained rule set that doesn't really need expansion. That every character you want to play, everything you want to do in this game is contained within the box. Does that mean you can't add more stuff to it, or we couldn't, or somebody else couldn't? No, you certainly could add more moving parts. But the reason why we eliminated feats as a core part of the system and making them an optional element was to put a hard control on how we expand that game.
And also you don't get into the, oh, I wish I had that feat.
Right, and then you have rebuild rules, which can be kind of weird. Hey.
I appreciate the 5th edition on streamline the rules are, and it leaves it open to house rule a lot of details. One thing though, I think stealth and hiding is left a little too open for me, and I want to, without any spoilers, the first encounter of the Fandelver dungeon. I'm not going to say what it is, but if you read it as it's written, those things that are there that can hide very efficiently in combat, that can wipe a party. And I've seen it. You go to YouTube, you'll see parties that'll wipe on that first encounter
right.
if the DM uses the ability to hide in combat. Let me just say that.
Right.
Was it the intention of the hide action where you can be able to hide in combat if it makes sense? Or is that, because there's the halflings that I'm seeing people, well, I'm hiding behind one of my allies, and now, is that how you guys intended?
It certainly wasn't how I intended it, but it was, those shenanigans were things I pulled in our playtest to show why that stuff is dangerous. There was one point where the barbarian had extra rage damage, and so I played a naked barbarian who just beat people without the sticks. And it was a lot of fun, but it wasn't good for the game. I think the thing that one of the things we were trying to do with this game is we're not designing for the power gamers. We're designing for the dungeon masters. D&D's a weird, and role-playing games in general are weird organisms, are weird products because we have no control over the user experience. And so when we over-design to compensate for how the audiences might use it, we find the game complexity climbs really, really high to keep pace with audience expectations. And so what we've done is say, we take a step back and say, if you're running D&D or if you're playing D&D, you're smart people, you're awesome people. You guys got this. If you're running the game and you're the dungeon master and you're controlling monsters, your objective is not to wipe the party, right? Your objective is to help the player characters win. And so it's trusting the dungeon master. It's fun to challenge it, but I've never seen that. All right, well that's fair.
Hands on your GM.
It certainly is. There certainly is a killer dungeon master thing that's still out there, and I'm guilty of it myself. But I try at least to think that in some world that there are dungeon masters out there who are player character advocates, because the objective is to have a good time.
Is there currently a plan to release a PDF version of the rules? My group tends to play it online a lot, and we really like the search bar functions.
I almost am certain that you will see the PDF version of the rules. I would, in fact, that would be ridiculous for not to do it.
I've been hearing around that we weren't going to do it this time.
No, I'm sure you'll have something. And I think that Morningstar, the Dungeonscape, is going to also deliver a lot of that too.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Because the search bar in PDFs is so nice. It's easier than indexes.
In 3.5, you have the deck of many things. But in fourth edition, you can see it in 3.5, you had the deck of many things. In fourth edition, at least in the core books, I didn't see it. Is there any plan to bring that back in fifth?
Oh yeah, I designed it. Just to clarify, one of the things that I spent about a month and a half working on was taking almost every artifact from the DMG 1 and putting it back in the game. Now, whether or not they all survive or not, there will be artifacts in the game. And part of the thing we also did was, and somebody asked me this earlier, was that magic items are not necessarily always good for you. And sometimes it's good for you to find something that's dangerous and has repercussions for using it.
Yeah, the first magic items is good.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good. So my introduction to D&D was in high school. My bestest friend in the whole wide world, gave me the complete guide to elves, and I was hooked. And he was a big Planescape fan. That became my favorite setting. It was just perfect, beautiful, and rich. In 3.30 and 3.5, there was a paragraph in the Manual of the Planes about Sigil, and I felt that was just an amazing setting, kind of left out in the cold. The Player's Handbook has a beautiful section, an appendix on the planes. Is there anything, I'm not even asking for a full line, just a book, more than a paragraph on Sigil, or just the way the planes are put together?
Right.
Anything.
So I'm very sympathetic. In fact, I'm with you. I'm on the same team. I love Planescape, and I love everything that product did. A couple things on that. There will probably be support. There will be support material. I'm not going to say it definitively, but I don't know what form it will take. But there will be support books for every major D&D setting that's ever been. It's just guaranteed. That will happen. But I'm not sure exactly what form it will take or how much content you'll have for them. But I expect more than just a passing paragraph reference. The other thing, though, is that the decision to return back to the Great Wheel was very intentional. So, all right, I'm going to confess something. One of the things that I found a stumbling block for 4th edition was that 4th edition changed two big things for the audience. One, it changed the story, and two, it changed the rules, both in spectacular fashions. And that would be fine for any game except D&D. So, you could have sold me on changing the planes, you could have sold me on changing the rules, but you can't do both of me at the same time. So we decided one of the very first things was we wanted to prove that we're good custodians of your game. And by doing so, to understand what those elements are that are important to you, the audience, and make sure that they were foremost in our mind at all times. And everyone that worked in this game loves Planescape. So,
thank you.
You're welcome.
At the end of this, could you sign my player's handbook?
I'll be happy to.
With the incoming changes for ability scores, are you guys looking to have ability score damage?
That's a good question. We had played with that a lot. One of the problems, and you probably remember this from earlier editions, that when you have ability score damage, it requires recalculation of your character sheet.
Horrible.
That's why disadvantage exists in the game, to absorb that. And so you don't really need it. You're welcome.
Hey, I came in a little late,
okay,
but I made it.
Hey man, thanks.
So I don't know what you said at the very beginning, but do you have an idea of, can you tell us what's coming out, and what do you have on the schedule?
So the only
top secret.
As much as you can tell us.
Sure. What's been announced is what was announced at Gen Con, which is the remaining books, and then there was a little bit of some internet leakage. We have to clean it up, I guess, about some stuff that's coming from another publisher, Sasquatch Games. So there will be there will be some products, but I think in the long run you will see more partnerships with Wizards of the Coast, and more products are coming out from both those, the union of those two Wizards and whoever else is working with them. I'm sorry I can't give you more.
All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
So my question, one of the things that I love most about the new edition is that there's so many different races and sub-races and classes and subclasses. Were you ever pressured to not do so much in addition to sell more books? Is that ever a design pressure?
No. We always wanted to make this the definitive player's handbook. We always wanted to. And in fact, we had to pare stuff down. If you were in the playtest process, there was a moment when the sorcerer and the warlock and the wizard were all subclasses of a mage class. And I was tearing my hair out while that was going on because I hated that idea. I think classes, for D&D, when we think D&D, classes is almost as important as hit points. It is so important and so integral to the game. And there's so much story that's wrapped up in even the really obscure classes that I think if I said Invoker, people know what that means, right? And people have stories they tell about Invokers. So if there's one person out there in the world who plays D&D who likes the Invoker class, then damn it, we need to give you an Invoker class because I don't want to invalidate your stories. So one of the things that I still bear as a cross is that there's a loss of the assassin as a core standalone class. It's represented in the rogue, but I still think it needs to be its own thing. So we were never pressured to spread things out or monopolize or to just try to bilk you out of more money. We wanted to give you everything we could in this book.
My questions are directly related to that. In other books, will we see more core classes like psionics?
So I love the creative process of making the new characters, and the 5th edition I think is great. All the options it gives you, and the backgrounds. I've only played it twice so far, but it seems like there's only a few background options, and they're kind of class specific. I mean, I love, no matter what class I am, saying, hey, I'm a noble, treat me better now. But will there be more backgrounds coming out, or is it more just you need to kind of customize your own for making characters?
That is a great question. So the background deal was one of the new things we added to the game to give you a sense of how to play your character and create more differentiation between two clerics or two fighters in the same party. When I did the initial design of the background rules, I wanted them to be packages that would deliver your skill set. So that was all the functionality I really wanted. As they evolved, they gain story, and they get an elaborate story, they gain equipment, and they gain skills, they get other stuff, and they kind of take up a whole page, almost a whole page all by themselves. I think that there is room to do more backgrounds, but I also think that backgrounds, if I was going to just advise you, which I guess I'm doing, I would suggest you use those for your first campaign, and then for your next campaign, I would advise you to tell everybody in the group to pick 2 skill, item, whatever, language, proficiency, stuff, and come up with a story of whatever, why you have those things. Because backgrounds are supposed to spark your imagination, but not be a thing that you're looking for to choose the best pieces from. So, because you can swap those stuff out. It's all such lightweight stuff, doesn't matter. So just use those as kind of a starting point, and then make up your own. Hey.
My gaming group has had a lot of fun with all these playtest packages. Can you hear me? Don't speak into the mic?
No, do
speak into it.
You got it. Thank you.
My gaming group, like I was just saying, had a lot of fun with seeing how the characters changed over all the playtest packets. In the last public playtest, we made a bard and had a lot of fun with the mechanics of that. And I noticed with the new player's handbook, the bardic music changed quite a bit, no longer really affecting all the people in the party. Could you talk about why those changes occurred or what caused that?
Sure. During that weird murky time between when the final playtest packet came out and when the books came out, there were we still had ongoing playtests internally, and we also had playtests from an elite crew of dangerous alpha playtesters. And so it was based on those feedback. There were a lot of changes that happened almost on the 11th hour, and at that point I was already doing wrap-up work on Monster Manual and DMG, so I wasn't really involved in the final put the player's handbook to bed. So I don't know why exactly that changed, but I imagine that it was probably pushback from playtest, and also maybe finding that it was just too good. Sorry for
My
not
half-worth barb thanks you.
My question is about the paladins, because I know you have the new oath system. I was just curious of your choices for why you chose that and all that.
Sure. We had, at one point, we had said that paladins in D&D were only lawful good, and I thought that was great, and not everybody did. So the idea for the oath system was to provide a lawful good paladin, but we also wanted the paladin to kind of scoop up a lot of the other character archetypes from previous editions. So the Green Knight option kind of recalls the Warden from 4th edition. And then the upcoming anti-paladin option in the Dungeon Master's Guide will blow open the Blackbeard and all the other dark stuff. What's neat about the oath thing is it allows you to have a cause you fight for as a paladin, and so that your cause kind of defines your character. And there's a lot of, and while there's probably won't be much expansion, there is room for doing your own expansion. So I could imagine coming up with a really cool fusion of two of those subclasses that are built around your own cause that you make up, either for your players or as a DM as a new option for your games. So that was kind of the goal there.
Hey, my question is about building character classes. What's your kind of process for that? How is it different in 5th edition than it was for other previous systems?
Sure. So we have, one of the things we do, well, this is really mathy and kind of boring, so I'll be, yeah, so it was really funny how much little story work you do on designing a new edition of D&D, since all the story work is already done, right? So basically what we do for class design is that we know what the curve is for damage output for a baseline generic class. And so we have this non-existent class that increases at a certain rate over a spread of time. And classes can deviate from that at any given level by a certain acceptable amount, provided they pretty much follow the line. So they're like the fighter spikes a few points above that when you get the extra attack, but generally follows that line. The wizard also generally follows that line. So when we do a new class, it's just we build story first. We say, what is this class functionality? What does it do? And like that was one of the issues with the Scion, and I guess which is why it was kind of held back, or we're still thinking about how we're going to do that. You know, the Scion may actually end up being a subclass of the wizard, or it may be part of the sorcerer too. You never know. But anyway, so
you said maybe.
Maybe, you never know. So the idea was we figure out what the identity of the class is going to be from the very start, and then we let that kind of guide the mechanics. So what we usually will do is we'll take 3 or 4 designers and we'll tackle chunks of that class at a time. So you know that there are different bands that are in the classes. They have the novice band, the apprentice band, and so on. So what should this class be doing at the apprentice or novice level? And so we think about that, we build those mechanics in, and then multiple designers will build in their own version of that, and then we kind of put them in a hat and pick out the best ones. And then we refine on that and continue going.
Alright, I DM a lot, and my biggest pet peeve is books on the table. When I played 4th edition, when the power cards came out for the classes, it totally took all the books off the table. Is 5th edition going to do like spells and items kind of the same way, maybe?
Didn't I see somewhere where there are items or spell cards?
It's a rumor. I don't know if you could confirm, deny it.
I can confirm or deny nothing. But I would not right? I mean, Gale Force 9 will probably, if they haven't already announced, I could have sworn I saw something about that online. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that Gale Force 9 is going to be doing some sort of card set, which would give you that. Okay. And if not, I mean, once the PDF's out, just copy and paste.
Hello. Hey. Actually, this is more of a statement than a question, but I'd say I'd like to thank you for the gender equality that I see in the artwork, as well as the game itself.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Probably about 8 months ago, I did one of the play tests, and I'm embarrassed to say that I haven't touched it in a couple months, but I remember a podcast talking about the Ranger's favorite ability, or favorite class ability, and the fact that if it's just a straight damage bonus, then it kind of puts him in an advantage where the rest of the party is just sitting back watching him kill this one type of thing. If it's more like a arch nemesis, then, you know, it helps one, but not the party. And I just wanted to hear more of the description and maybe some R&D about the Ranger and your ideas overall the additions about the favored class.
Sure. So the interesting about favorite class is that there is, for favorite enemy rather, is it creates a DM permission. So there are a lot of things that kind of crept into the game over the last couple editions where they are very, very much DM permission type things. And what I mean by that is that you have to ask the DM permission if you can have fun or not. So, for example, if you take the knowledge history skill from whatever edition of the game, that is a permission item, because I say I want to use knowledge history, and the DM says, well, I don't know what the hell it would say, so you don't get to have fun because you made that option. And so that also puts pressure on the game master or dungeon master to figure out opportunities to make your character feel special, and it's just kind of, and I find that it distorts the game a little bit. So favorite enemies are the same way. If you choose favorite enemy undead, then that means that you win every fight with undead, ever. Right, all the time. So the dungeon master is going to get sick of that after a while, and so you will then stop. He or she will stop using undead, and then be working fighting giants and dragons, and then you have this feel bad moment that you didn't choose undead. So rather than do that, it's more what we chose. The direction we went with was more about the type of fights that you're going to excel in. So like there's a horde breaker, or the guy who's good at fighting lots of little dudes. He's better at that, and that's one of those things that will show up enough in the game that it's fun. Or fighting large dudes.
Like Andre the Giant, much better at crowds.
Right. And so what we try to do is try to find, we want to put the ranger, we want to make the ranger better in circumstances rather than against very specific foes. That was a goal. Okay.
I'm a big advocate of 3.5. I like flavor and fluff a whole bunch. And in 3.5, our spellcasters at level 1 were flavor weak. They got magical missiles and stuff. And at level 9 spells, they're creating their own demi-planes. They're summoning islands out of nothing. And it felt good to be a 9th level caster. In 4th edition, I look at the low-level spells and I look at the high-level spells, and there's some more damage, and maybe I move them a few more squares, and it didn't viscerally feel more powerful. I just wanted to ask if things kind of scale that way flavor-wise in 5th edition, or was that a priority? Did you get good feedback on this?
Sure. So one of the reasons why you never feel like, let me back up. One of the reasons why 4th edition has, when you have a 23rd level red power or encounter power, attack power, it does 1 extra die of damage above what it did for the power you swapped it out for, or 2 extra dice. The reason for that is that because it goes back to that encounter budget for class balance. So when you're putting 2 classes next to each other, you don't want to have you don't want to ever feel like you made a bad choice because you're consistently poor or ineffective in the situation. So 4th edition kind of addresses that by reducing the damage output line, and shrinks it so that you have a predictable outcome in every fight, roughly. So 3rd edition was built on the architecture of 1st and 2nd, which meant that as you got more powerful, you get to unlock more and stranger and cooler abilities, right? You go back to 1st edition, you could cast Lightning Bolt, but you'd also risk it bouncing off the wall and hitting you back, right? You can cast Fireball, but you risk it blowing up and coming down the corridor towards you. So, which is super fun and awesome. So what we try to do is strike a nice balance between those 2 things. We know that every spell is going to have a certain amount of damage it's supposed to deal, or it has to have a certain kind of story impact at a certain point. So what we decided to do from the very start was say, when is the earliest that invisibility should happen? Well, Gary Gygax says second level spell is the earliest that invisibility should happen. So you know what? Invisibility is at 2nd level. And then when we also say, what about power word kill? Well, again, Gary Gygax said that it was going to be 9th level, so it's going to be 9th level in our game. So what we did, you'll find those same spells, but they're mechanically balanced slightly more efficiently, so that you feel like you're getting bang for your buck and bigger, spectacular effects, but trying to control some of that the exploding wizard kind of problem you had in other editions.
One of my favorite parts about 4th edition was that it introduced a lot of new, very specific classes, like say the Avenger or the Warlord, that we hadn't really seen before. And it feels like some of the classes, for lack of a better term, got killed and had their stuff taken by other classes in this. What was the process like deciding which classes should come back and which one should just be like a specific build under another class?
We had a lot of fun doing that, and it was really painful too, because there are a lot of, as I mentioned, I worked on a lot of 4th edition product, and so I was responsible for some of those classes who ultimately died. What 4th edition would allow us to do was create very specific stories for unique for unusual archetypes, and then present them as really big, interesting classes. But what we found with 5th edition classes, they kind of wanted to be more, they wanted to be bigger, they wanted to be more umbrella-like. And so what we were able to do is take some of the corner case and smaller, weirder classes and then drop them into builds. Some things we looked at based on just numbers of players. We had data from the character builder, and it's surprising to see that, you know, maybe there's 150 people of all the people who are subscribers that have at least one Seeker class. Seeker's not coming back to 5th edition anytime soon. But everyone's playing clerics, fighters, warlords, and not warlords, but clerics, fighters, and rogues, and the big ones. And so that kind of drove us to say, well, a lot of the edgier stuff, like the Rune Priest, it was a really neat idea, and it played far different from any other class in the game. It may not have been, it didn't grab enough people for us to justify it being its own class, and so we would fold it in underneath another one.
That's about it for the time.
Thanks for playing, guys. And thanks for